We updated our policies to recognize that the term Zionist can be used as a proxy for Jews and Israelis. We banned content claiming Zionists run the world or control the media, and we do not allow for dehumanizing comparisons of Zionists.
Okay, so we can dehumanize other people. We can dehumanize blacks. We can dehumanize whites. We can dehumanize Palestinians. But we can't dehumanize the mob of men who were ganging up on that one woman, that one defenseless, vulnerable woman, and threatening to essay her. Okay, but the second point that I want to make about this is the scariest point of all. Welcome to another episode of Political Newbie. I'm Noah Clark, and this is a space for newbies to politics like me, a formerly ignorant average citizen who's simply trying to make sense of the mess, and I thank you for joining me. Wow, so many things have happened this past week. It's been insane. I mean, a humanitarian ship off the coast of Malta attempting to reach the starving population of Gaza was bombed, which the Turkish Foreign Ministry and others have accused Israel of carrying out. Wildfires raging through Israel that seemingly materialized out of nowhere, fiercely burning through Israel's 77th Independence Day. The $67 million military jet that fell off the USS Truman and sank to the depths of the Red Sea. Britain flying in to back us up in the Yemeni war because the US needs backup to take out Yemen. Okay. Mike Waltz, a possible Israeli asset because he was messaging Bibi White House details behind President Trump's back, was demoted to UN ambassador, which to me seems treasonous because why wasn't he fired? Anyway, that's just scratching the surface of all the wild things that went on last week. But today I want to focus on the fact that I am brand spanking new to all of this in terms of being politically active, and I am very ashamed of that. So I am trying to course correct by voraciously consuming content from all sides to try and kind of gauge what everybody's talking about. Because obviously at this point, the era of the experts or trusting the experts is dead, right? You literally have to take the experts with a grain of salt. The corrupt ones ruined it for everybody. And now I not only have to listen to the experts, but I have to listen to the comedians, the civilians, like literally everybody. And, of course, my gut instincts. Here's the thing. We can all admit that if we had listened to the uneducated folks and the stupid science deniers who were spreading all that misinformation all over the place that the experts were trying to, that the experts were effectively censoring into oblivion, we could have avoided the catastrophe of COVID. In fact, we could have avoided the catastrophe that happened when we decided to get into senseless wars in the Middle East. But I'm sure you have a very long list of all the things that we could have avoided had we paid a little more attention to the stupid people who the experts were censoring into oblivion. And here we are again. History is repeating itself. The experts are back and working tirelessly to censor the stupid, ignorant, non-expert people into oblivion. And I cannot overstate that because it is so critical. If you made it this far, I'd love to see you in the comments. If not, leave a thumbs up and let me know that you were here. Thank you so much. On my quest to make sense of this mess that I find myself in as an American citizen who spent most of her life in the dark, the war being waged against our First Amendment right is freaking me out. Because I experienced how easily everyone you love can turn against you when groupthink is triggered. 2020 was a devastating example of what happens when our First Amendment rights are stripped away, whether by law or by censorship. And that PTS, it's hitting me really hard right now, especially as I devour pro-Israeli content and listen to them, for example, double down on conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism and essentially working hard to ban any criticism of Israel, which I find really gross, by the way, because conflating not only shuts down valid political critique of the ideology of Zionism and the policies of the Israeli state, but it conveniently erases the fact that Arabs are Semites too. I find it gross that they're casually conflating the two as if dehumanizing Palestinians isn't anti-Semitic. So I'm still on the hunt for Zionists presenting arguments from a position of humanizing the Arabic people. But I haven't encountered any yet, so if you know of any, send them my way. But in addition to that, no one has been able to convince me that the continued existence of Israel should be subsidized by American taxpayers. At this point, I'm Team Matt Walsh, and I think a lot of Americans are on this issue. If you are a country that needs to be subsidized by another country in order to exist, then you're not a country.
I only care about my own country. I honestly don't care about other countries. I wish them well. I don't wish any of them, I don't wish them ill. I think they all have a right to defend themselves, and they should. I think that if you can't defend yourself as a nation, or if you can't survive without being propped up by another government, say ours, then you shouldn't exist as a country. That's just the way of the world. From my perspective, it seems like they can handle themselves quite fine. If there is any country out there that fundamentally cannot exist without being subsidized by American taxpayers, then not only should that country not exist, but that country already does not exist.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen the Matt Walsh Tucker Carlson interview, there's a link to it in my description. I encourage everybody to go look at it. So yeah, you can say the exact same thing about Palestine, right? It's not a state. But Palestine isn't an existential threat to my First Amendment right at the moment. Or making it illegal for American citizens to put the financial needs of their cities and states before the needs of Palestine. So right now, my focus is Israel. A foreign state can actually influence our government representatives to impose speech sanctions on our American universities and institutions. Have we completely lost our sovereignty as a country? You know what this makes me feel? It feels like what the Zionists are expecting from the Palestinians when they invaded their homes after the Balfour Declaration was implemented is what they're expecting from us after invading Washington, D.C. Total submission. That's it. I mean, when I saw this tweet about what's going on in Washington, I thought it was a parody, honestly. But listen to this. San Marcos, Texas, a city of just 70,000 people, identified that its residents were sending $4.4 million tax dollars to Israel each year. So the city council drafted a resolution calling for the reallocation of those funds towards domestic priorities. So Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, is threatening to cut the city off from all future state contracts if it adopts this resolution. Okay, can we take a moment, please, to applaud the city council? Because we do have domestic needs that need prioritizing. So when I hear Donald Trump cutting USAID and all this aid that we're sending out of the country, I absolutely support that. Imagine you want to prioritize your family's needs, your neighbor's needs, your city's needs, your state's needs, your country's needs with your tax money, and your government representative tells you you are out of your mind if you think that you're going to put your needs above the needs of a foreign state. In fact, don't worry, it's illegal. Let me just remind you. That's essentially what Greg Abbott is saying. Here's his tweet. Anti-Israel policies are anti-Texas policies. Okay, what about anti-Spain policies? Or anti-France policies or anti-Britain policies? Are those also anti-Texas policies? And then he goes on to just brag about the fact that he sent a letter, okay, to the city of San Marcos today condemning its proposed anti-Semitic resolution, openly flouting Texas state law, because it is the law. It is illegal to prioritize your own financial needs over the needs of a foreign state. Here's the letter. I am aware that on April 15th, 2025, the San Marcos City Council considered a resolution calling for a transfer of permanent sovereignty over the occupied Palestinian territories and an embargo on the state of Israel. I don't see what's wrong with that. Boycotting is a form of free speech. We can do whatever we want, can't we, with our tax money? Shouldn't we be able to do that? That's why we elect our representatives to represent what we want to do with our tax money. Okay, all right. I don't know why it's illegal, but in my last episode, that's what I was talking about when I said that it's illegal in 38 states currently to boycott whoever you want, and it's only applicable to Israel for some reason. In Texas, the letter goes on, no government entity may enter into a contract worth $100,000 or more unless it includes a written verification that the contracting entity does not boycott Israel, specifically Israel, and will not boycott specifically Israel during the term of the contract. He needed to remind Texas that. I'm sorry, but I unconditionally reject that. So this is the madness that I've woken up to politically, and I am scrambling to find someone who can convince me that we must neglect our needs in order to subsidize foreign entities, especially one that, as it seems to me, has been a net negative for our country if you only consider the catastrophic wars that they've consistently lied us into over the past 20 years, costing us tens of thousands of soldiers' lives, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers who were disabled from wars that had nothing to do with defending our sovereignty. In fact, did we have any beef with the Middle East before 1947, 1948? So, okay, then I hear the religious argument. The reason why we should prioritize Israel's needs over our domestic needs is biblical. And then I come across this debate.
Premise one, Christians should not support a false messiah or an antichrist. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Should I, as a Christian,
send my support over to a country where 30% of them want to introduce antichrist?
Yes.
Okay.
Why not?
I don't know where else to go with that.
That was a debate between Andrew Wilson, host of The Crucible, a debate show on YouTube, and is known for discussing socio-political issues from an Orthodox Christian perspective. And the other guy was Ridvan Aydemir, known for his critiques of Islam. He just converted to Orthodox Christianity. And they were both focusing on whether or not Christians should support Zionism. It was one of the most interesting debates I've seen so far because it really got me thinking about spirituality, honestly. I was raised a Catholic and left the faith a long time ago because as a kid, my exposure to the faith was oppressive and abusive, and it stifled my curiosity of life, so I rejected it. But now that I'm older, it's really hard to ignore that there's a greater force at play. And I've been really encouraged to revisit my faith, even though I've seen so much evil and hypocrisy from faith leaders in these religions. From what I've been exposed to, I feel like every religion uses supremacy or moral exceptionalism to justify cruelty. And relevant to this topic, it was really hard for me to watch a mob of men the other day threatening to essay an extraordinarily vulnerable lone woman in the middle of the night right here in Brooklyn.
Why did they mistake you for somebody that needed to be assaulted?
What happened, and it happened really quickly, was that people near me began filming, and I didn't want to be on anyone's camera roll. So I pulled up my scarf over my face. And I just want to be clear that it was not a keffiyeh. It wouldn't matter if it was, but it wasn't. And that just escalated things almost immediately. A woman began screaming at me.
You see, the fact that you guys let her in is the fact you guys want violence. When we went close to them,
you're a little idiot. I live here. I'm allowed to be here just as much as you are.
You're some weird ass pro-Palestinian motherfucker.
Is that you? You want someone to bend you over and fucking rape you like they're doing to the Jews in fucking Palestine?
I'm trying to think of fucking insane.
Right down the block.
These babies you guys waste of semen.
That they need to get me out of there. And almost immediately, a group of like 100 guys encircled me and just started shouting like just vile insults at me. They were saying, "You're a waste of semen, you're a failed abortion." They were threatening to rape me. They telling me to go back to Palestine. And I also just want to say that I was standing right next to a long line of police. And as this began to happen, I moved closer to the police because I thought that that would afford me some safety. And I was wrong because they did not do anything to intervene. And they really just stared straight ahead with their eyes glazed over as if no crime, nothing was happening before their eyes. There's a long and fraught history of tensions involving this community in Crown Heights. I would say like 2 weeks ago, members of the Orthodox Jewish community brutally beat an elderly Black man in a wheelchair and threw him to the sidewalk.
Panic and then I try to get up. But lucky thing someone was there.
Earlier that night, you mentioned it before, like that same mob that attacked me, they threw a brick at a woman's face. They assaulted an anti-Zionist Hasidic man that night, also throwing him to the ground and removing his religious head covering. And, I've lived here for a long time. I know the history, like the Orthodox Jewish community reigns terror on this neighborhood with impunity.
It was interesting to see Eric Adams finally come out because it took a significant amount of time for Adams to say anything publicly. And it seems like there's this attitude that if somebody is a kind of pro-Palestine demonstrator, the kind of rules don't apply. They can just get beaten up. And I wonder if them finally realizing that you actually weren't. You were just a person who lives in the neighborhood, if that played some role. Did you get any indication from the detective of how important kind of his bosses see this case and what it was that moved them kind of to actually do something?
Yeah. So I think I talked to the detective on Monday afternoon and they seemed to really be scrambling. He had told me that they had only just gotten the directive that they were going to be investigating this like a couple hours prior. So this all happened on Thursday night, where the police, again, watched it happen. And they didn't take any action until this video went viral over the weekend. And the pressure. And then there was pressure on the mayor and the NYPD.
A lot of things have been said about this incident on the internet, so I'm not going to go into a lot of things. But from my perspective, two things stand out. Not only do I not hear Zionists in leadership positions vociferously condemning this behavior, but why attack the vulnerable? Doesn't religion prevent you from attacking the vulnerable? The teachings of religion? All religions? I don't know. So the argument always is that one side is extremist and violent, but in the very least, be honest. Violent extremism exists on all sides. And of course I'm thinking, is this a religious thing? But the more I pay attention, the more it seems as if this has nothing to do with religion. The core of our conflict is shared humanitarian values because we do see people from all faiths, Jews, Christians, Muslims, atheists, and others, marching together in defense of human dignity and against oppression. Which of course reminds me of the solidarity between members of the Jewish community who marched alongside blacks during the civil rights movement. But just as in any community, there were American Jews who were fully committed to racism. And I wonder if their views had any connections to Zionism. Because it seems like a no-brainer to deduce that the Jews that marched with the oppressed black community back then are marching with the Palestinians today. But the second point that I want to make about this is the scariest point of all. Without social media, we'd still be trapped in the groupthink the media has spent decades building and depending on through narrative control, making us see only one side as extremist, dangerous, and morally bankrupt, blaming it on religion. But now that it's all on the table, almost full transparency, you'd expect to see more honesty, right? You would. Instead, the push to conflate and censor is increasing in a near state of panic, it seems to me. Listen to this clip of pro-Israel Coleman Hughes, American writer, podcaster, and opinion columnist known for his work on race, public policy, and applied ethics, define anti-Semitism. Okay? Ready?
No, I don't think anti-Zionism is necessarily anti-Semitism. I mean, anti-Semitism is, I take to be bigotry against Jews in general, against Jews in particular as an ethnic group or perhaps as a religious group, akin to racism against other groups. How anti-Semitism kind of differs from racism against other groups is that it often is wrapped up in this conspiracy that the Jews control everything.
It's always wrapped up in this conspiracy that the Jews control everything. Okay, fine. And by the way, I got into it in the comment section of one of my older videos, this one right here, whichever side of the screen. And they were telling me, oh, do you know what Zionism is? Or what does Zionism mean to you? And I'm like, and that I'm ignorant and stupid and dumb, etc. All those, lovely names. But all the information that I've been consuming so far, from all the Jewish scholars, from all the experts, etc., they all have different definitions of Zionism. Which one should I rely on? You know, everybody's like, this is the version. Everybody says that their version is the version. So as a person who is outside of that, which version do I rely on? I pretty much have to use my instincts, my gut, how it relates to me, don't I? But now listen to what Norm Coleman, a former US Senator from Minnesota, had to say about Jews and their control over everything, which is anti-Semitic, by the way, at the Jerusalem JNS, Jewish News Syndicate Policy Summit on April 27th, 2025, which was like last week.
A majority of Gen Z have an unfavorable impression of Israel. And my friends, I think the reason for that is that we're losing the digital war. Okay, they're getting their information from TikTok and whatever it is, and we're losing that war. When you think about it, the masters of the universe are Jews. You know, we've got Altman and AI, we got Zuckerberg, we got Sergey Brin, we got the whole group across the board. Jan Combs, you know, founded WhatsApp. It's us. And we have to figure out a way to win the digital battle. Amelia, we got to get our digital sneakers on so that the truth can prevail over the lies. And when we do that, the future of Israel will be stronger because a majority of all Americans will support Israel. We'll make that happen. We have to make it happen. Thank you. Baruch Hashem. Thank you.
We'll make that happen. We have to make that happen. Okay. And, you know, what war does he think they're losing? He said they're losing the digital war, but again, a war on what are they losing? Is he sort of surprised the Gen Zs are smart enough to understand that the conflict in the Middle East did not start on October 7th, no matter how many times Western media repeats it on their airwaves? And then when he says that they have to figure out a way, okay, to win the digital war so that the truth can prevail, the truth, which will then result in the majority of Americans supporting Israel, and then the Facebook's chief, Jordana Cutler, at the same summit, comes out and says this.
I created a new role specifically focused on the Jewish diaspora. It is a privilege to represent Meta to Jewish communities worldwide. I am proud that Meta's commitment to addressing anti-Semitism on our platforms has remained steadfast, especially after October 7th. Our policies are industry-leading in protecting Jewish people and Israelis on our platforms. Our community standards include policies that prevent harassment, violence, and incitement, and include a robust framework to combat anti-Semitism. Our hateful conduct policy includes specific protections for Israelis and Jews. We banned Holocaust denial and distortion back in 2020. We changed industry thinking on this issue, designating denial as hate speech rather than misinformation. It wasn't just about facts. It was about protecting people from harmful conduct. We banned content with harmful stereotypes about Jews, such as the claim that Jews run the world or other major institutions.
Okay. I'm so sorry, but banning content with harmful stereotypes about Jews controlling the media? How is it a stereotype if an American senator, someone in power with influence over American policies, literally says out loud that Jews are masters of the universe in reference to their influence over the media? And then this woman comes out and tells us the plan she's implementing to control the media. Okay, I'm just not following the logic here, but this must definitely be another instance where the Zionist logic sort of collapses on itself, what I've been saying in my other episodes, because that's what I'm noticing every time I encounter Zionists who are presenting some logic, some scenario for me that they're trying to convince me of something. I find that it's like cancels itself out in real time. But anyway.
We updated our policies to recognize that the term Zionist can be used as a proxy for Jews and Israelis. We banned content claiming Zionists run the world or control the media, and we do not allow for dehumanizing comparisons of Zionists. It's a delicate balance between safety and expression. My role is to ensure that the voices of Israelis and the Jewish community are heard in this policymaking process.
Okay, so we can dehumanize other people. We can dehumanize blacks. We can dehumanize whites. We can dehumanize Palestinians. But we can't dehumanize the mob of men who were ganging up on that one woman, that one defenseless, vulnerable woman, and threatening to essay her. Okay, this is just banning content on social media, which means absurdly expanding the definition of Semitism to infringe upon free speech. Okay? People are getting deplatformed for this, also debanked for this. Now they're getting deported. They're getting put on no-fly lists. In addition to this, our government representatives and powerful lobbying groups are actively pushing to make these bans on the internet the law of the land. Okay? You can't make this up. You really can't. This is literally Hollywood. There's clearly a massive disconnect between how anti-Semitism is being legally defined in proposed legislation and the way some prominent individuals like that senator openly discusses their influence in media and politics. Why are our government representatives asking us to acquiesce to lobbying groups changing American laws to prioritize a foreign state at the expense of our constitutional rights? This isn't about any religious or ethnic group. It's about policy priorities and democratic representation. Here's the Daily Wire discussing the fact that citizens are rightfully enraged because Americans have been deplatformed, debanked, and put on no-fly lists for no reason other than being accused of being an anti-Semite.
Well, you bring up this point about this guy Fuentes, who, but it's not just him, right? It's other people too, who will make this argument and say, are we so much better than the Taliban? And the reason that some people can make that argument with more credibility is because they have, as we joked, been kicked off of social media. They have been taken out of financial institutions. They've been put on the no-fly list without being accused of crime.
Yeah, we got some problems.
I guess my point again is descriptive, which is, I understand why some people would make even that semi-joking comparison when perhaps we would not.
So the guy talking is Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire, and the guy responding is Jeremy Boring. When Jeremy says, we got some problems, who's the we he's referring to? Because I believe he's referring to Zionists. That's my guess. That whole group of people who includes 6 to 7 million Jews, 30 to 50 million Christians, and other denominations of Zionists in the US, right? Imagine a reality where you can be anti-American any day of the week. But if you're an anti-Semite, whatever that means these days as the definition continues to expand arbitrarily, your entire life is ruined. Not like hypothetically, like really, it's happening right now to American citizens. No trial, no nothing. You're accused, that's it. End. What is that exactly? Or the fact that a bar owner, I don't know if you've seen this, David Portnoy, he's on the internet claiming that he can ruin the lives of some 20-year-old who ordered F the Jews signs, but instead of ruining their lives, because he has that power, he'll send them for a teaching experience at Auschwitz. Can someone explain to me why one bar owner believes that he has the power to ruin the lives of a group of people and then feels entitled to smugly offer, charity instead? Because he's a benevolent and charitable human being? Because people uttered words? Okay, anyway, they are right, right? We are all noticing. And they are especially losing the war with the youth, our future leaders. And this brings me to a growing reality that Ian Carroll has been talking about, and that is the fact that the media is relying on the old system of smoke and mirrors to manipulate and gaslight us into complicity, which is no longer working. And they're having a really hard time adapting to the transparency and honesty that social media demands.
And I think that a lot of these people that are, continuing this gaslighting campaign, both the ones in front of the screen and probably the ones behind the screen, I think a lot of them are probably older people. And I think a lot of them don't understand, the exact power of the way social media really does spread and the way that people really do. I don't think they realize how much better the audience of young people is at reading comments and at checking the like ratios and at checking the reposts and at getting the whole side of the story. I don't think they realize how much they're failing at this because they actually don't know how to use the medium anywhere near as well as the audience does. And so they're just continually blundering and blundering and blundering. And Douglas Murray and Jordan Peterson are just two examples, but they are stark examples of these sort of kind of dinosaur-y neocons trying these outdated tactics that really just...
Outdated tactics. We saw this play out with the 15 medics who were executed and buried in a mass grave with their vehicles, right? How the media literally tried to lie their way into this or out of this. Like, the world, pretty much the entire Western world, tried to convince us that these people were Hamas. And luckily, this guy was recording this event and it came out. Luckily. And then even when it came out, Israel lied. They tried to lie to cover that up. And then when more information came out, they lied again. And they just lied a couple of times until they then settled with a professional mistake. What are we talking about? Professional mistake, really? You really want us to buy that? This is what Ian Carroll is talking about. No one's dumb enough to do that anymore, okay? Because you have to contend with the transparency that social media is demanding. So before I leave you in this episode, I want to play you one last clip to button this all up.
I come in with a different perspective than maybe some people who are really interested in the debate, in that I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm constantly hearing from the peanut gallery demanding that I kind of give my verdict or my take on Israel and Israel versus Palestine and all this kind of stuff. And I have given my take. And my take is I don't care that much.
I don't care that much. Dog in the fight. He doesn't have a dog in the fight. Okay, well, here's why Americans have a dog in the fight and why we care. States have anti-BDS laws only for Israel. Okay? Crazy. Bernie Sanders and Thomas Massie's constantly telling us that our White House is held hostage by Israeli lobbying groups. Now, you don't have to rely on influencers to know that that's happening. We're relying on the people on the ground, on the scene, telling us that. Okay, so these aren't talking points. We're not parroting anything. These are literally information coming out from the people who know. It's because, out of all of our allies, our government officials are pushing for laws to criminalize criticism of only one of our allies is getting special treatment. What is that? Censorship was dangerous when it happened during COVID, but I didn't realize that there's an entire group dedicated to weaponizing it to this extent, where we can criticize our own state, but not a foreign one. And so many Americans who have been awake longer than I have are rejecting it. And I'm joining the group. Okay, folks, that's all for me. I hope to see you in my comments, but if I don't, please leave me a thumbs up to let me know that you were here. And I can't wait to see you in my next episode.